Hello and welcome to Real Opinions, and today I'm going to be giving my initial impressions of Legion based on the first episode. So it's not going to be a review, I'm not going to give a rating or anything, because given the nature of this show, it's very hard to tell how things are going to play out in the long run, and therefore it's very hard to know exactly what I think of it at the moment. Having said that, based on episode 1, very, very positive at the moment. What I like the most about Legion is that it feels very, very idiosyncratic. We get a lot of superhero shows now. A lot of superhero shows, a lot of superhero films, and I'm all for it. I love them, and I think they've done a really great job of making everything feel distinct. You know, they all have different tones, they all have different settings, different senses of scale and characters. I don't feel superhero fatigue, but this still feels like a wonderful breath of fresh air just because of how different this is. Like I said, I think that lots of superhero things feel very different to me. Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't feel like Daredevil, but Legion is in a whole nother spectrum of its own. The way that it constructs itself, the way that it does its storytelling, the way that it structures its narrative, and more importantly, its visual style and its sound, all so strange in a way that I never thought I'd see a mainstream superhero property do. Like, when I heard that this was going to be weird, when I heard people say that it was going to be a bit abstract, I didn't think it would be like this. I thought it would be mainstream weird, corporate weird, not bordering on avant-garde, which I think this genuinely is. It feels like a creator's singular vision. That's what I like about it. This doesn't feel like it was designed by a committee. I mean, I'm sure there was committee involvement, but it feels like an artist's vision. It feels like someone has put a personal stamp on this, and it is great. For the people who don't know, Legion is an X-Men spin-off, kind of, and it tells the story of David, who has the telepathic mutant powers. It's a little unclear what the extent of his powers are at the moment. I think it's unclear to the character himself as well, but it's to do with mind powers anyway. And as well as that, the other important thing about David is that he has been in a mental institution since he was a teenager because he suffers from schizophrenia, which is obviously a bit of a problem given that his powers involve reading other people's minds and going inside other people's heads, because he hasn't got a clue what's real. He doesn't know what's part of his mental illness. He doesn't know what's part of his powers. He doesn't know what anything is. He cannot distinguish between reality, between who's real, who's not, when he is, where he is, anything like that. And the reason that this is so compelling is because they make the brilliant decision to put us, as the viewer, in David's shoes. Everything from the really fractured, really strange experimental editing to the expressionist lighting and cinematography and the quite loud, blaring mise-en-scène, it all contributes to putting us inside the perspective of this weird, slightly troubled individual. It feels at times almost Taxi Driver-esque in that respect. You know, it uses the same kind of unconventional, jarring editing techniques, the same kind of, like I said, expressionist lighting and everything. I would make comparisons to Fight Club, to Clockwork Orange, to these things where we're put inside the head of a, I want to say, anti-hero. I mean, it's up to you on your definition of anti-hero, who doesn't quite see the world in the right way, and Legion does that too, and it really, really goes for it. There are parts of the show that are really, really strange, really surreal, kind of like bizarre dream sequences, moments of kind of almost metaphorical imagery, and there's a musical sequence that just comes out of fucking nowhere at one point. There's some really, really strange stuff, and I don't just mean strange for a superhero film, I mean strange. Luckily, I think it's all anchored by a really strong performance from Dan Stevens, who plays David himself. I think that this could have gone quite badly if it wasn't for having someone who can ground it like Dan Stevens. But because we care about David, we're willing to go along with everything a bit more. I think that Dan Stevens does a good job of making him empathetic, but also slightly disturbing, slightly scary or threatening. And he just does a very good job of looking like someone who doesn't know what the hell is going on. And I think that kind of helps you, eases you into it. In general, I really cared about the characters, actually. There's a love interest who has, like, not a quirky personality, but she's more than just a bland love interest, and there's a specific element to her character to do with the fact that she can't touch anyone that obviously we've seen in other things, like the X-Men films with Rogue, for example, but they explore it a bit more here, and I think that makes her interesting. and sympathetic again. The villainous characters, if indeed they are villains, it's a little unclear at this point. They seem quite charismatic, quite interesting. Generally, I like everyone. I think the only person I would maybe put a question mark over is Aubrey Plaza's character. I'm not sure yet, but she could go either way. She could be a bit of an annoying comic relief if she overstays her welcome, but at the moment, I'm fine with her. It's just a question mark at the moment for me. In general, I really like where the story's going, and in particular, how they construct it. It's obviously we've seen things that play around with chronology and play around with unreliable narrators before, and we've seen those things in TV, but this really goes 100% out there with it. The chronology is incredibly confusing. We're never quite sure what we're seeing. There are sequences set in like David's memory, but those moments are memories, but also other characters are involved in the present in those memories, affecting what's happening in the memories. It's very, like, as trippy as it sounds, but it works really well. And as well as that, I think I watched the episode again afterwards, and I started to understand it a little bit more, so I feel like it's not just confusing for confusing's sake. I feel like I could actually make it cohesive if I watched it over and over again. There are definitely little details I picked up on the second time, and I also understood certain conversations a little more, so I do think that there's something to it, and it's not just obtuse or confusing for the sake of it. I think that the music was very, very impactful. It's very, very strange again. That's the key word here, strange. At times it feels Wes Anderson-esque, and I'm going to come back to that Wes Anderson comparison, because as odd as it might seem, because I made Taxi Driver comparisons and now Wes Anderson, but there are lots of little things that I think seem Wes Anderson-esque. I'm not a big Wes Anderson fan. I haven't seen too much of his work, but from what I can gather, there are certain signature Wes Anderson things in this. There's the symmetrical framing, there's the music, there's the fact that the aspect ratios keep changing, and incidentally, I'm not sure exactly why the aspect ratios are changing in here, but they seem to sort of correlate with shifts in reality and time, so that's fine. I think there's a reason for that. If you're wanting to watch a standard superhero show, I would be prepared not to get that, for several reasons. Firstly, the actual story in the first place isn't really a superhero thing. He's not a vigilante. He's not trying to save the world. He spends most of this pilot in a mental institution questioning what the hell is going on. And then when he gets out, he is basically selfishly motivated and then gets accidentally wrapped up in a conspiracy. I would say this feels more like a sci-fi show than a superhero show. Like a weird, trippy sci-fi. There's no vigilantism, no kind of superheroics. There's not even really a supervillain at the moment. So I don't think you should expect a superhero show. Secondly, there aren't really many action sequences. There are effect sequences, and I thought they were impressive. In particular because at certain points you could tell certain stuff was practical, and because even when there's not that much action, when David does use his powers, they show it in an interesting way rather than just pointing the camera and having CGI happen. That, you know, they make it visually unique. So I do think that if you go in not prepared for Legion's weirdness, that could be off-putting for some. But I like that they were brave and they took a risk with that. I can see this not being for everyone, but it works for me really well at the moment. I thought there was even moments where it managed to be quite creepy. That was not what I expected. When I heard it was going to be weird, I expected kooky or something, but no, it gets kind of disturbing. There's this, as of yet, unspecified kind of monster called the Devil with the Yellow Eyes, and when you hear about that, I kind of expected an Insidious-style monster or something fairly generic and mainstream. I did not expect what this thing looked like. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it was almost David Lynch-esque. Again, I want to come back to the avant-garde comparisons, but when I saw it, I was like, what the fuck? That looks really strange. And whenever it appears, there's this weird kind of dissonant jazz music that it's like a blast of a trumpet that sounds like it's like out of tune or something. It's really odd. It's a weird creature. Weird music accompanies it. And then the lighting goes all weird and red. It's all so like dreamlike. I loved it. I don't know what any of it has to do with anything yet, but it really is intriguing. Which is the other thing. There's a lot of like ambiguity at the moment. We don't know what's happening. We don't know who certain characters are. But I will say that didn't frustrate me because it just made me hungry for answers. And again, I think if you didn't care about the characters, that could just fall flat on its face. It could just be irritating, but because you have an emotional anchor to the show, because it's all presented in such a striking way, you're willing to go along with it. That's what I thought anyway. I think the dialogue's quite witty. I think that the writing is quite strong. There was definitely some humor. Like, it didn't overload you with humor like a lot of comic book things do now, where it's just joke. There was like 3 or 4 jokes in the whole episode, but they felt well judged, well timed, and they actually worked for me. So I'm perfectly happy with the sort of seriousness to humor balance they've got going. I like that it feels edgy. I like that it feels genuinely different, genuinely risky. I like that it puts you into David's mind, and I like that it finds weird ways to present things. There's this sequence where we kind of watch a transfer of consciousness happen, and the way it's presented is by like a camera gliding across this field with little TV screens showing someone's life story. It's weird. Very weird. So weird. I keep saying this. It's so weird, but it's inventive. It's very inventive. I think that's the key word here. It's an inventive, brave show. And I think that's something that the superhero genre really benefits from. I really look forward to seeing where Legion's going to go in the future. I think that Dan Stevens is one of our most underrated actors, and I'm glad to see him have a show that he can sort of carry on his own. And yeah, really can't wait to see what's going to happen next. When the series is finished, I'll likely do a proper review. But at the moment, that's my first impressions. Thank you for listening. I'm sure that was more disjointed, more confusing than Legion itself, because I was going all over the place, but it's quite a difficult show to talk about. Thank you. I recommend that you give it a shot, if nothing else. You might not like it. I can see a lot of people not liking it, but I really do think you should give it a shot. Thank you. This was Real Opinions. Like and subscribe. Generic YouTube closing. Bye-bye.